Hey, Mitchtram here. I want to tell you about something I saw not too long ago, maybe a couple weeks back, maybe 3 weeks. Honestly, I see this quite a bit. I'm walking down the bank and I come upon a couple of guys. Their tackle box is open, their rods are out, they're casting. It's a decent looking spot, a spot that I would probably stop and fish myself. And I asked them, like I always do, "You catching them all?" And they said no. And so I asked them how long they'd been there. And they said, "Well, I've been here about an hour or so." So I kept walking. I fished my way down the bank. I picked up a few along the way. And it started to get hot. So I was coming back. And I walked back by them about an hour and a half later. Same two guys, same spot. I asked them again, "Any luck?" And they said, "Nah." And then one of the guys said, "They're just not biting today. It's just one of those days." And that's the part that really kind of got me. You always hear people say, be patient, stick it out, give it time. And those two guys were about as patient as it gets. They were there probably about 2.5 hours in the same spot. But here's the deal, man. Patience doesn't mean that you stop thinking. The anglers who catch fish consistently are not just sitting there hoping things change. They're watching, they're adjusting, and they're moving with purpose, with a reason. So I have 3 questions that I kind of work through in my mind before I decide whether to stay in a spot or move on. And I'm going to walk you through those today. All right, let's touch on patience for just a minute. A lot of anglers think patience means staying put. So they walk up to a spot, they make a few casts, nothing happens. So they make a few more casts, still nothing. Then they just keep casting because somewhere along the line, they heard or somebody said, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what fishing is. Just be patient. But that's not really patience. Sometimes that's just waiting and hoping. Now, I'm not saying patience doesn't matter, because it does, but you need patience with a purpose. Patience to slow down your Texas rig. You need patience to let a jig drop and set for a minute. You need patience to work a stretch of bank the right way instead of just burning cast after cast after cast out there without thinking about how you're working the bait. Staying calm, it matters. Not spooking the fish, that matters. Not rushing your lure, that matters. But kind of sitting in one spot, not changing anything, and hoping the fish finally just turn on and start biting, that's not a strategy, that's just hoping. So you find a spot, it looks good, right? It feels like it should hold fish, so you keep throwing at it because leaving feels like you're giving up. But sometimes that spot has already told you, no, nothing here. That's where a lot of guys, they kind of get stuck. They think they're being patient, but they've really stopped trying to solve the problem. And fishing is really about thinking and solving problems. So when I walk up to a spot or when I walk a bank, the first thing I do is I try to read the water before I ever make a cast. And this isn't complicated. A lot of people make it sound like it's rocket science to read the water. All you're doing is looking for clues. Shade is one of the first things I always look for, especially in the summer when it's hot. Not every fish is going to be sitting in shade, right? But shade gives them cooler water. Water's typically cooler around the shade and a better place to ambush bait. So if I walk up and there's shade on one side of me and wide open sun on the other, I already know where I'm probably starting. And structure or cover is kind of the same thing. A dock, a laydown, a grass patch, rocks, anything different. Fish like edges. They like places where they can sit close to cover, let food come to them, places that they feel safe. It's like their house, kind of, is a way to think about it. If you don't see obvious cover, I kind of start looking for maybe transitions, deep water running up close to shallower water, or a hard bottom like a rocky bottom suddenly turning into like softer sand or a grass patch after it. clear water meeting kind of a dirtier water, a grass ending, maybe a little point coming off the bank. It doesn't really have to be dramatic. Sometimes a tiny change is enough. And the other thing I'm doing, I'm always watching for activity in the water. I'm watching for bait. If I see shad kind of flickering the top, minnows schooling around, little bluegill running the bank, or birds working the water, that's a key clue. That's telling you something. Something is going on right there. And another thing is wind. Wind matters. A lot of people think a real calm day is great. It's typically not. Wind pushes bait around and breaks up the surface. It makes fish feel safer feeding in shallower water when the water is a little choppy because of the wind. So the bank the wind is blowing into is almost always better than the side where the wind is blowing away from. It's harder to cast into that wind, but the fish are stacking up against that windy bank, or at least the bait typically is. Another thing that hurts anglers is they pick a lure or a few lures and they kind of throw them the same general way. Throw out, retrieve, throw out, retrieve, throw out, retrieve. They don't get any strikes and they just decide the fish aren't biting. Sometimes that's true. I'm not going to tell you it's not. I'm not saying that there aren't times when fish really are not biting, because there are, but there's a lot of things you can try. And a lot of the time, the fish are there, you just haven't given them the right presentation of your lure. You're not putting it in the right part of the water, in their strike zone. So when it's slow like this, I don't immediately start digging through the tackle box and tying on lure after lure after lure, trying different things. The first thing I start doing is I start changing how I'm retrieving the lure. Same bait, different speed, or different retrieve cadence. So as an example, if I'm burning a spinnerbait back and nothing's touching it, I'll slow it down. I might even pause it and let it kind of drop and then pick it back up, right? If I'm dragging a Texas rig along the bottom nice and slow, nothing's happening, I may speed it up, or I may hop it a little bit and then pause it, and then hop it a little bit and then pause it. Those adjustments, they sound small, but they matter a lot. Your way you're pulling that bait back matters. The same exact bait, just a different speed, can a lot of times give you a completely different result. If that doesn't work, I start thinking about the depth. Am I fishing over the fish's heads? Am I dragging it underneath the fish's heads? Am I staying too shallow? Am I letting the bait fall long enough? If I'm throwing something that sinks, I may give it a little pause after I throw it out and let it sink down a little bit before starting to reel in to get it deeper in the water column to bring it back. If I'm fishing a Texas rig or a jig, I may change the weight, tie on a heavier jig or a lighter jig, or add some weight to my Texas rig, or remove weight from my Texas rig to make it fall faster or slower. Sometimes they want it right on the bottom, sometimes they want it falling, sometimes they're more in the middle of that water column, just being suspended, and your bait's passing right underneath them. After I've changed speed, I've changed depth with no results, that's when I start thinking harder about the lure itself. Maybe I need to go from something loud and reactive to something slower and more natural. Or maybe I need to do just the exact opposite of that. Thinking about, like, maybe I've been trying to finesse fish, right? But the water is a little dirtier than normal. Maybe the wind is blowing and they need something they can feel or find easier. That's when maybe you pull out the spinnerbait or the chatterbait or a crankbait, right? To give it some vibration. And that a lot of times can make sense. So it's just another, reading the water, what's going on. The point I'm trying to make here is change lures with a purpose, not because you're bored. Problem solve and change for a reason. Think about why you're changing that lure. Now, moving to a different spot. This is the one a lot of anglers just wait far too long to do. I'm not saying make a few casts and leave. That's not the point. So if I'm seeing signs of fish, I may stay there a while. If I get a follow, maybe a bump, I see some swirls out there, I see bait fish moving along, or I feel like I'm around fish, then I'm gonna keep working that spot. I'm gonna try to problem solve, right? Like go deeper, potentially change bait, slow down, speed up. I may even change angles and make the same cast from a different direction, right? Go on the other side of the laydown as an example. But if a spot is giving me nothing, I haven't had any strikes, no follows, I don't see any bait in the water, just like there's no signs of life, and I've already made a fair effort, I'm not going to stand there for 2 hours trying to force it. At this point, moving is the adjustment. Moving doesn't mean packing everything up and going to the other side of the lake. I mean, I know that's extreme, but sometimes it just means walking down a couple dozen yards. Sometimes it means moving from the sunny point to the shady inlet from that point. Sometimes it means moving from the grass flat to the point. Sometimes it means getting to the other side of the same piece of cover so the bait comes across it at a different angle. That's the difference. You're not moving because you got impatient. You're moving because the spot has given you an answer. You've given it a fair shake. You've tried. Now it's time to move. Those two guys at the lake probably needed to question that spot a lot sooner. So the 3 questions I kind of run through in my head. Before I decide whether I stay or move, I run these through my head. The first is, have I changed my retrieve? Speed, pause, cadence. Am I actually fishing it differently, or am I throwing it the same way and expecting something different to happen? The next thing that goes through my mind is I ask myself, have I changed depth? If I've been fishing shallow, have I tried to go deeper? If I've been reeling a bait in right when it hits the water, have I let that bait sink a little longer before starting my retrieve? If I've been dragging the bottom, have I tried something that stays higher in the water column? Maybe a suspended jerk bait. Fish don't always move very far to eat. Sometimes you're close, but you're just not in their strike zone. And the last thing, or the third thing that kind of goes through my mind is, have I seen any sign at all? Have I had a follow, a bump? Do I see any swirls? Are fish pushing bait? Do I see bluegill kind of acting nervous? Anything that tells me the fish are in the area. If I've seen signs, I'm more likely to stay and keep adjusting. If I've changed retrieve, I've changed depth, maybe changed the bait, and the spot still is giving me nothing, that's when I move. That little checklist keeps you out of both ditches, so to speak, right? Moving too early before you've actually worked a spot, or sitting there for 2 hours because somebody told you patience is the answer. And once again, patience, it's important and it's a good thing, but it's patience with a purpose. The problem is when patience turns into just sitting there and hoping something changes. Those 2 guys at the lake, they weren't doing anything wrong on purpose. They weren't purposely not trying things. They were putting in the time. They were trying to make it happen. But who knows if they thought about the 3 things we've just talked about. And we know they never questioned the spot because they were there for 2.5 hours. That's the part I want you to remember. Good anglers are not just waiting longer than everybody else. Good anglers solve problems. They read the water, they make adjustments, and they move when the spot stops giving them a reason to stay. So, I'll say give this a try next time you're out. Run through those 3 questions. Have I changed my retrieve? Have I changed depth? Have I seen any sign of fish? If the answer is no, don't be afraid to move. Get up and move. Move down 20 or 30 yards. Look for something else that looks fishy, so to speak. Anyway, that's it for today. If this helped you, subscribe. I put out straightforward fishing content every week. No hype, no gimmicks. Drop a question in the comments if you got one. I read everyone and I do my best to respond to every comment. I might miss one. I don't do it on purpose. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one.